If you are interested in bringing up lagging body parts, making muscle and strength gains consistently, and having the raging feeling that you crushed your workout, then this video is going to be perfect for you. Let's be honest, there is a lot of what I like to call shiny shit in fitness, stuff that looks good but has no basis in efficacy, evidence, or substance. Exercises that make for good Instagram reels, techniques that get a lot of views on YouTube. Now, I originally believed blood flow restriction was the same thing, a technique that looked cool but likely was not nearly as effective as good old-fashioned strength training. And then I stumbled across some research, and then I read another study and another. In 2017, I went as far as writing my thesis for my master's degree on blood flow restriction. Long story short, BFR is effective as traditional strength training, as crazy as that may sound. And here's the history, research, and how to implement BFR into your training program. How does it work? Essentially, you occlude, not cut off, blood flow at the proximal location of your limbs, just below the shoulders or just below the glutes. As you know, when performing an exercise, blood gets pumped into the active muscles to contend with the induced stress from the external resistance. Occluding the limbs allows blood to get into the muscle, but not get out of the muscle as quickly. The blood builds up, giving you the best/worst pump you will ever experience. Best because the pump is massive, worse because it's also gonna be the most painful. And this leads to one of the first misconceptions people have about BFR, that it induces muscle growth via causing massive amounts of metabolic stress. However, we are learning that metabolic stress is not a driver of muscle growth. Mechanical tension is the sole driver of muscle growth, and metabolic stress simply leads to more mechanical tension. Same thing with BFR. Further evidence this is the case comes from research on the surrounding muscles being trained while performing BFR. If metabolic stress was the driver of growth, then it stands to reason only the occluded muscles would see growth. However, it doesn't pan out that way in the research. A meta-analysis of 9 studies found BFR induces as much muscle growth in the surrounding muscles as the muscle being restricted. For example, if performing the bench press with your arms occluded, you will see as much muscle growth in the pecs and anterior deltoids as you will the occluded triceps. How to occlude? You can use many different apparati to occlude blood flow. I've just used knee wraps. You can use those floss bands from Rogue. Of course, the legs are thicker than the arms, or they should be if you're not skipping leg day. So you will need something wider and thicker for your legs, like knee wraps. There are also occlusion cuffs you can get over on Amazon, but they're not necessary. You should also seek a 7 out of 10 as far as tightness. Tight enough to restrict, but not so tight that you totally restrict blood flow. If you start to get tingling or your limb turns blue, it's definitely too tight. How well does BFR work? Incredibly, BFR induces as much muscle growth as standard training, or almost. Considering you won't use more than 30% of your 1 rep max on a given exercise when using occlusion cuffs. This brings with it all kinds of amazing benefits. First, going lighter and still getting the same amount of muscle growth is big for 2 populations, the injured and the elderly. Of course, a person with a knee injury won't be able to go heavy on an exercise like the squat or leg extension, but with BFR, because it's so much lighter, that's not really a limitation. And using a much lighter weight will allow the injured person to still train the surrounding musculature and see muscle and strength gains. There is also evidence suggesting this will help heal damaged joints and tendons. So not only will you be able to continue seeing gains through an injury, but heal from said injury faster. All these same benefits apply to the elderly, of course. Elderly people don't necessarily need to do very much differently in regards to their strength training, but in the majority of cases, the elderly will suffer from some injuries. With use, the human body begins to break down. There are things to help prevent this, of course, but in general, it's not a matter of if an injury will happen, but when. And the longer you're on this earth, the more opportunity there is for injury. Again, however, BFR will allow for an elderly person to not use heavy weights while still getting the benefits of heavy weights. It's a win-win. I would also argue there's some reason to use BFR for non-injured younger lifters as well. If you want to increase the amount of volume you're doing without putting a lot more stress on your joints, BFR is a fantastic option. Say, for example, you want to increase the size of your triceps, but doing a lot of skull crushers, overhead tricep extensions, etc. is uncomfortable on your shoulder and elbow joints. Being able to do these exercises with a fraction of the weight you would otherwise use will keep stress low on the joints while still causing growth. BFR also induces the same amount of strength gain as heavier training. On the surface, it wouldn't seem like that should be the case, but the high amount of metabolic stress and therefore mechanical tension induces strength gain. How to add BFR to your training? It's very simple. You can just replace whatever heavier training you have planned for that workout with its BFR equivalent. Instead of doing 3 sets of 6 to 10 on a tricep push down, perform blood flow restriction with a much lighter weight. The protocol across most of the research for occlusion training is 3 to 4 sets, 30 to 40 reps on the first set, 15 to 20 reps on all of the following sets. Roughly 30 seconds of rest in between each set. In most of the research, the subjects kept the occlusion cuffs on while resting. This would make sense from the perspective that you want to maintain the occlusion for the entire set. You do not need to do any more volume on top of the occlusion training within a workout for that body part. After doing your 3 to 4 sets, the affected muscles will be toasted. For this same reason, I also recommend leaving BFR to the end of your workouts. Your arms and legs will not be usable afterwards. Quick note on exercise selection. You can use pretty much any exercise you want. Of course, general exercise selection principles still apply. Consider the muscle you want to hit and reverse engineer things from there. I do prefer using isolation exercises since I am usually seeking to hit one muscle when using this technique, but compound exercises work as well and can be beneficial by helping you get some extra volume for the surrounding muscles. BFR works very well with supersets as well, particularly for the hamstrings and quads and the triceps and biceps. Just set up the 2 exercises you're performing and then go through the protocol we talked about earlier. Take the 30-second rest break after performing the second exercise. Warning, the most pain, good pain, I have ever experienced in the gym was using occlusion training while performing a leg extension and leg curl. I was crawling out of the gym afterwards. Like always, you should be getting stronger. Strength and muscle growth are not cause and effect, but they are correlated. They're adaptations that usually happen at the same time. So if you're getting stronger, you can safely assume that you're also building muscle. As I've said before, use strength as a test for the effectiveness of your muscle growth routine. And BFR is no different. You should consistently add more weight, reps, or sets to your KAATSU training. It's pretty difficult to get stronger at an exercise that you do high reps on. Lucky for you, I've tested the hell out of how to get stronger at KAATSU training. And once you're able to complete the top end of the BFR rep set scheme, 40, 20, and 20, with consistent form, no cheating, and the smallest amount of weight possible on your following workout. If you're unable to get to the bottom of the range, 30, 15, and 15, the weight is too heavy. So you want to take your strap. I'm using a knee sleeve here, or a knee wrap. You would want something thinner for the arms, but for the sake of this video, this is all I got, so this is what we're going with today. You want to occlude at the proximal location of the muscle. Proximal means closer to the origin point. So for triceps and biceps, up here. You want a 7 out of 10 on the tightness scale. So relatively tight, but if you start to notice any tingling, it's too tight. If it start to change colors, way too tight, loosen it. You can also know if you're in the right spot when you start getting some vein action. A little vein action, see that bad boy right there? Right, and then you'll perform your exercise. And you can do compound moves or isolation. I'm gonna use isolation. Your first set, 30 to 40 reps, pretty much across the board. You can also superset exercises, which is what I'm gonna do here. I'm not counting right now because I'm talking to you, so if I don't do exactly 30, leave me alone in the comments. All the normal exercise rules apply. We want full range of motion, full extension, full flexion. Also, again, start noticing all that vein action. All right, this is starting to hurt really bad. I'll call blood flow restriction the best worst pump you'll ever get. And it is. All right. We'll move this down and switch over to a bicep curl. So again, first set, 30 to 40 reps. You'll take 30 seconds in between your sets. Your second set will be 15 to 20, 30-second break, 15 to 20. If you're feeling froggy, you can do a fourth set, but something tells me you won't, because this, again, hurts really bad. I already broke down the research on the benefits of this in the first part of the video. This is just for demonstration purposes. I can't talk. On near failure, and once you've done your 3 to 4 sets, then you get your cuff off, not in between sets, because we don't want to lose the occlusion. So only take the cuff off when you're totally done. And speaking of totally done, we're totally done. That's the video. Thank you for watching. I'm Coach Ty with Muscle Wiki. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. 2 more videos in the corners for you here in a second, and I will see you with the next one. Deuces.